so pleased to have you joining us today for the Mindset Michele TV show. Now, my extra special guest today, and they're all extra special, but this one, is so dear to my heart because we share so many similar interests and backgrounds and ways of looking at the world. So I'm super, super excited about today's show with the fabulous Chris Wildeboer. So Chris, hello and welcome. And just as a little bit of background, she's the CEO of Balance Central. She's worked for quite a number of years with clients all over the world. She's an award-winning author of books and business processes and workshops. So she's a very, very accomplished and fabulous woman. But would you like to tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself, Chris?
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Michele. It is absolutely lovely to be here. And sure, let's mix it up and less the official intro and more of the real Chris intro. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I was in quite a dysfunctional family. There was gambling and alcohol and a lot of mental not so goodness. And as a result, at the age of 17, I found myself out on my own, literally kicked out of the family home. And reality check, absolutely. And when I look back at that time, it was a survival mode. I just went into taking one step forward to just bother getting out of bed in the morning. I was working full time, so I had somewhere to go and somewhere to be, but I don't know that I was really living. And so I got a very rude awakening into adulthood, is what I call it. And so that was my 20s was not quite the same experience as most people experience in their 20s, where the world is their oyster and anything is possible and everything is fabulous. Nah, not so much. One of the most fabulous things, though, was at 21, I did get married, and I still remain married to that man. So that is lovely. That's 30 years on. But I still was in very much survival mode for those first 10 years of marriage. We jump forward to when I was about early 30s or late 20s, early 30s, I gave birth to my daughter, and another rude shock and reality. And what I discovered was that a lot of the personal development work that I had started to do in my 20s had given me a little bit of growth, but my daughter triggered more emotional and mental issues that spiraled into things that did not look good, was not healthy for her, was not healthy for me. And yes, I made it through. And yes, she's a functioning 22-year-old now. So all is good in the world. But I still had a lot more work to do. And so for the following 10 years, so throughout my 30s, I started really looking seriously at myself. And I swear the 30s were my 20s. I started to go, oh, this might be possible. Oh, what's that? And by my late 30s, I created the business Balance Central. And yes, 12 years on, I can proudly say that, well, for one thing, it's been going for 12 years. So that in itself is a win. The other thing is that I do have the privilege of working with people across the globe. Who thought that was going to be a thing? I can tell you my 20-year-old self did not even know that that was a possibility. And to work with people on an international level is ridiculous. When I sit here in my backyard, seriously, this room I'm in is in a shed in my backyard, and I have an international business. So that's the brief version of, life story of me.
Wow, Chris. And I want to start by really acknowledging that sharing your story and sharing it so openly and so well is really having been through some difficult young circumstances as well. I really appreciate that, being able to share it neutrally and as what it has happened, because you can't change what's happened, but what has happened has created who I am now. And celebrating, yes, I have an international business out of the shed in the backyard of my house. I mean, I really, you know, for anybody watching and going through their own things in life, I always love these kinds of conversations, because it's about, yes, you can do it. Wherever you are now, you can do it. And whether it's a business in the shed out of the backyard or whatever it is in your life, having that faith that if people can come from really difficult circumstances and still become great successes, then you can do it too. And I think that's really such a powerful message I was hearing from you then, Chris.
Yeah, thanks. It is one of those things that I'm really proud of. And as much as I'm proud of it, I mean, in all honesty, I will still second guess it. So I've been known, maybe not daily, but, you know, periodically going, really? Is this my world? Really? Because I still can feel like I'm that 20-year-old, and I wonder how I made all of this happen. So it continues to be not a double-edged sword, but it still has a duality to it. As much as I appear, yay, I've got this successful business, there is still this duality of continuing to manage all of the experiences that I've had.
And over the years, what I've really understood from my journey with things is that the history and the background has led to who you are, but it also is what keeps refining who you're becoming. Because a lot of it, even when, like, I love the way you're explaining it, because even when you then make peace with it, it's the onion layers, and as other things or new things come up, you can still then find yourself, like you were explaining when you had your daughter and things came up, then life will every now and then keep bringing in something else, and you kind of have to look at again, oh, okay, am I reacting to this in survival mode, or in, you know, I'm an international business and I'm doing well mode, and looking at how you're reacting to things is I think so important.
Definitely. And sometimes I've had some of that survival come through when I am being the international business person, and then navigating through that. And it mixes, because my complete way of looking at any business is that it's not the business, it's the individual that's walking in the door to the business that makes or breaks the business. So I bring the good and the bad, all of the experiences. Well, they're not really bad experiences, they just are the experiences. And so it's a continual combination. I sometimes wish it wasn't a continual combination, but that's just life. It just is everything. And you're right, you can't change those experiences. I just bring them and adapt them and make the most out of what I've been able to learn.
And I think you also, like me, would look at, well, what is like gravity? So what is something that's happened and it's kind of set, like you can't change gravity unless you go to the moon or Mars, which one day will be possible. But for now, gravity is kind of set. But then how do you change, and that's why it's a mindset show, how do you change how you've interpreted or taken that on board?
And interact with it. Yeah, totally. Yep. Definitely.
And I think that this is a really lovely way then to look at, well, with, you know, the Chris that is working through that survival and doing fabulous and great story, and the Chris that's got the international business, etc. With all of that being the multiplexities of you and who you are, what do you think then you would say is success to you? How does that then lead into what you define as success?
Oh, whenever I feel that sense of success, it is always because I've been present. So if I can be present with my daughter who comes from uni and tells these stories about what she's done in the day, then I can actually interact with her. Now, she's studying to be a vet. She speaks another language. I don't know what she's talking about. But if I can be present, she feels listened to, she feels heard. And so that establishes a relationship that continues to build that relationship that will last a lot longer than, let's say, I had with my mother. And when I'm present with my clients, I create a similar feel for them, because they will regularly say to me, Chris, I share things with you that I don't tell anybody else. Like, this isn't something I would share even with my partner. And that's success to me. Being present for someone else with a really neutral space is, dollars, whatever, freedom, whatever. No, that's not my thing. Being present.
That's where I loved in that movie Avatar, the greeting of I see you. And I really hear that from you as the gift that you're giving your clients and your daughter and everyone is around when you are listening to them, you are hearing them on all of the different levels and they're really feeling held. And that sense of success for you is giving that gift of holding people for wherever they're at.
Totally. And isn't it interesting, when I look back at my history, I wasn't, I'm going to qualify this, I didn't feel like I was given that gift. And so it is a bit of a lifelong aim to, when I give that gift to someone else, I'm actually giving it to me at the same time. And so it's partly unselfish and partly selfish. Again, that duality of sure, you can be the Good Samaritan, but there's a receiving that happens. And so when I'm being present, it's just as much for me as the gift that I give to others.
Exactly, because that energy in the space that you create when you're being present for them, you're feeling it for yourself as well, because you're hearing and being present for you.
Yep, totally. So that's absolutely where I see success. And I don't see that as success just for me, but I watch other people doing it. And when they do it, and they may not do it as intently or as deliberately as I do, but when they do, they feel the magic. They just feel this, we just had these great aha moments, or, that connection occurred. And for me, I love seeing that happen, not necessarily, like almost as an indirect consequence of me doing it, to watch them do it.
Well, it's interesting because I think, religions and especially Christianity have an interesting insight into all these things that we don't necessarily always make those links about. But when they say, and especially in Catholicism, and I'm not Catholic, but they say, peace be with you, I think that that's very much on that same thing. They're talking about reaching that state where you're at peace inside. And that peace comes from listening to yourself, listening to what's going on for you, listening to what's going on with others around you. And I think that energy that people get to through praying and other different ways, you can also get to in that state of really deeply listening to what's going on for you and holding others around you.
It does seem to be a fundamental requirement of the human race, doesn't it? It doesn't matter what you do to achieve it, or what your beliefs are in that. That is a commonality that I see across the world.
Well, and I'd say that, and not any faults or anything, but it comes back to, yes, that parenting and the generational stuff that gets handed down. So not necessarily, parents don't necessarily know how to do it, so they don't share it with their children. And so when people experience it, they keep going back because it's such a place of sacredness and safety.
I do believe so. And I suspect that I've analysed this a lot. Okay, way too many hours analysing this. However, I'm not sure that as much peace was required in generations gone before us. And so I see the peace being required more intensely because of the way the world is and the amount of noise and the amount of information overload. And it is a little bit being brought to the fore. And so as much as I absolutely did not have an exceptionally helpful childhood, I can also see that there didn't seem to be as much of a need. So
I can kind of see where you're going with that. And I think part of it may also be that previous generations didn't necessarily have as much of an insight into their own emotions and share every single one of them in a Facebook post every 10 seconds. And so that awareness or transparency, if you like, I agree that our generations now that are alive at this moment, we have an insight and a view into how people are thinking and how we're thinking in a way that no other generations have ever had, which then leads to, yes, having that sense of being held and community is greater as a need than it's ever been before.
Yeah, definitely agree. Yep.
And with that greater need, how do you think then people can kind of build that mindset to fill it for themselves or fill it for others? What would be 3 tips that you would give for building that success?
Well, my first one is persistence. I take that from my life lessons. I swear if I did not take that one step into the next step into the next step, I wouldn't be here today. So persistence has always been not only a coping strategy, but now I've turned it into a growth strategy. So that would be my number one, is persistence. And to be more specific about that and what I do today to ensure that my mindset stays on track is actually daily habits. So I have persistent daily habits. Now, some people will say the word consistent, but I feel like I have to persist with them because that allows my energy to just try that little bit more and a little bit more stretch of a comfort zone. So I change it to a persist rather than being just consistent with it. So that's my number one, persistent.
Is there something in there that rather than using consistent, I can see that the word persistent is actually more important for you. What do you think is in there in that difference in the nuances of the word, if you like?
Well, consistent implies that we continue doing the same thing over and over and over again. Persistence has a push in the energy. It has a stretch, a expansion from what we did yesterday to what we do today. Now, it doesn't have to be, it could be a micro step. It can be the tiniest little movement towards something, but that's the difference for me. Is consistent is staying and doing the same thing over and over and over. Persistence is in the stretch.
I like that because I also, when I think of persistence, I see it in the sense that whatever is happening in your day, and because your day is different every day, it means that you keep that persistence. So you keep going no matter what else is going on. Whereas consistent is, every day at 10 o'clock I do blah, 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 as opposed to, well, I keep persisting when, it's been one of those days and I don't get to do it until 11 o'clock at night, but I did it because I persisted rather than consistently did it at 10 a.m. So I love that difference that you've explained there.
Yeah, cool. And so my second tip would be permission. Permission to get it wrong, and you get a fresh start at any moment you want. And I think that goes a bit with the persistence and the way that you just articulated it back. It is that we often go, right, we've done that. And it's like, yeah, that was a bit messy. Okay, let's tweak that. And so I find giving myself permission. I also apply permission to being human. So if I happen to wake up and I persisted with my daily habits, but I didn't quite reach the mark that I did yesterday, which can happen, it allows me to go, you know what, tomorrow I'll just do it again. And I don't beat myself up, because so permission allows me to stop the beat up, really. That's what it does.
I think permission's also really good, because it for me, the way that I use it a lot is with myself and with my clients is around being human. So, and it sounds funny to talk about, you know, giving yourself permission to being human, but people, because of social media or whatever it is, end up with such high expectations of themselves and others and the world, etc. And then when they're disappointed, it really is, you know, you have to kind of let go of maybe expectations at times, and then understand that people being human means that they're doing the best that they can, but it might not meet what you're looking for. And so I really love this permissioning, because the permissioning to be human is something that I, you know, and social media is so full of the rah-rah type of people saying, work 60 hours a day and never sleep and never this and never that. And it's like, well, actually, if you're permissioning to be human, then you have good days and you have bad days. You have days where you're more energized and go-getter, and you have days where you can crawl out of bed and brush your teeth, you know. So that permissioning, actually recognizing that you have all of these elements of being a human being.
Yeah, totally. So my third one would be timing. Sometimes things just don't slot in the way that we think they should, because we pre-decided. And sometimes the timing just needs to wait. There just needs to be a gap, a pause. Now, we like to think that a pause doesn't exist, or that a pause will not last for 6 months. But sometimes a pause is that length of time. And we need to understand that timing is there to help us, not to be a hindrance. And I often hear, oh, I'm going to set the date that I'm going to achieve this thing. And then when that doesn't happen, the world has fallen apart. And the world has not fallen apart. The world has not stopped spinning. There's just other elements that have come along for the ride. And so now the timing needs to also adjust and change. And so timing is the other thing that I really focus on. And I then bring it back and use it. I practice it every day in a lot of ways. I will tune in to whether I need to pick up my phone and call someone, or just send a message in some form. And I lose count of how many times people will say, Chris, your timing's impeccable. Seriously, how did you know? I was just thinking of you. How did you know to ring me? And I don't actually consciously know. It's not like I've gone, oh, it's 10:05. It must be time to make that call. No. I just trust the feel. So timing is another thing that I love to practice every day. And I think that's the thing for those 3 mindset tips, is these aren't things that I have mastered.
It's been human, Chris.
These are things that I do every single day.
I love around the timing, because that's something that with clients as well, helping them to understand that when things are flowing, it may mean that, yes, you know, go with that flow and experiment and keep going down that path. And then there's other people that may have been trying to do something or working at something for many, many years. And it's just really helping them to understand, well, maybe it hasn't been time and it may be time later, but what else may you be missing along the way, and just helping them to reset their mind again around, well, and that's why I love timing. Is the timing right? You know, have we just had children? Are we just buying a house? Are we this? Are we that? All of those other elements that mean that timing is not necessarily always lining up for people for some things.
Yes, and yet it does line up. Like, that's the magic. It's like we get caught on the fact that it's not lining up. And then if we just look back in time, we go, oh my goodness, look how well that was all perfectly timed. It's like, yep. But in the moment, or looking forward, we get caught on it.
Yeah, I love that comment, the phrase from the Best Marigold Hotel. If it's not okay, then we haven't got to the end yet. Was something along that line.
Yeah,
it's all going to be okay at the end. So.
That's right. And if it's not okay, we're not at the end.
Exactly. And I know that human frustration, that frustration feeling again, means that people may be really frustrated that it's not lining up and it's not flowing. But it really is about letting it go and letting the timing take you where it wants to go. So I'm just quickly having a check on, I can see that the live stream is going merrily. But if you want to share with people maybe briefly, what would you say to that 20-year-old Chris that got asked to leave home? And you know, I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like trying to build a life and then getting married at 21. That's still quite young, and building a life together then. So what advice or tips would you give to yourself?
This is always a tough one, because I think that there are so many tips that I could give myself that would be helpful. But I think a fundamental one is to not always assume that the definition of family is what everyone assumes it to be. So I certainly had the mum and the dad and the sisters and the dogs and the cats. Like, that was the family that I grew up in. But so from the outside, you could say that that was the family environment and that defines family. But I found closer connection in more of a sibling or parent, or that closeness that what I imagine family really should be, and what I've created for myself with people that have crossed my path, rather than the people that I happen to be blood related to. And I think that we can get caught in, this is the definition of family, this is what we need to create, and this is the version. Because that then represents that we get caught in the limitation of who we can be and what our definition is in relation to what that family definition is. And that's pretty much what I've had to push past, through, around, over, all of it, to find that definition of me. I have often been known to say that I'm the white sheep of the family rather than the black sheep, definitely the white sheep. Because I had to break the mold.
And also, I think very much in terms of taking care of yourself, going and finding that support from elsewhere if it's not coming from within your family defined unit. And that's so important for so many people. And unfortunately, I know that we could keep talking through these amazing and very deep topics for a lot longer. But Chris, how can people get hold of you after today?
The easiest spot is directly on my website, balancecentral.com.au. Great information on that homepage, and there's always a chance to click through to my calendar and simply have a chat with me.
Fabulous. And how generous of you, Chris. And I'm sure that if they are chatting with you, that they would feel very, very held. and you would be creating that magical space with them there. But Thank you so much for such a really profound, I think, today show on how to create that mindset. So thank you for being such a great guest today, Chris.
Thank you, Michelle. It is my pleasure being here, and I'm so glad I could be part of your show.
Fabulous. And to everybody viewing out there, you know, this may have raised some subjects and topics today that you may have found a little bit disturbing. So reach out to people if you have. But otherwise, it's been my real pleasure and my joy to be here with you all today to look again at a different lens and what it is about mindset and success that we can look at from the fabulous Chris and like my other guests, putting together more and more tools and tips that hopefully are helping you to create that mindset for success. So until next week, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.